German police are reportedly hunting for a Tunisian asylum seeker who's now believed to have carried out the lorry attack in Berlin. It's said that documents belonging to the man were found hidden in the lorry. He's thought to be in his early 20s and understood to have arrived in Germany last year. Following the attack in Berlin, new security measures are put in place around Buckingham Palace. We'll have the latest on the manhunt in Germany, also this lunchtime. A married multi-millionaire property developer is found guilty of murdering his escort girlfriend after she threatened to blackmail him. Huge explosions at Mexico's most popular fireworks market. At least 30 people are killed and many more injured. President Obama bans offshore oil drilling in the Arctic in one of his final acts before leaving the White House. And after dozens of near misses with planes in the UK this year, plans for tighter rules for people who own drones.
In the south, patients say their patience is wearing thin with their local GP surgery in Reading. And the rugby veterans trying out a new sport, the new converts to walking rugby.
Good afternoon and welcome to the BBC News at 1. Police in Germany have reportedly launched a nationwide hunt for a Tunisian man who's believed to have carried out the lorry attack in Berlin. It's understood his identity papers were found in the cab of the truck. It's thought he is an asylum seeker who arrived in Germany last year. 12 people died and almost 50 were injured when the lorry ploughed through the crowds in the centre of Berlin on Monday night. Christian Fraser reports.
Amid the chaos and the panic of Monday night's attack, the man at the wheel of this truck slipped into the dark undetected. The man arrested, a 23-year-old Pakistani migrant, has already been released without charge. Now we discover there's a new suspect, said to be a Tunisian asylum seeker who is still at large. German newspapers are carrying a photo of a 21-year-old man known as Anan A, who used a mix of identities. He's said to be known to German police and was wanted on charges of assault. The truck, carrying 25 tons of steel girders, had travelled from Poland to this factory in Berlin. The driver was Polish, Lukas Urban, a 37-year-old family man who was later found dead inside the cab. His cousin, who owned the truck company, said they lost contact with Mr. Urban around 4 in the afternoon. He was called yesterday to identify the body. There were stab wounds on the photo I was shown, he said. It was clear he'd been fighting. His face was swollen and bloodied. I learnt about the gunshot wounds from the police, who told me that apart from being stabbed, he was also shot. That struggle inside the cab has left important clues. There were asylum papers found beneath the driver's seat. So where might this suspect have intercepted the truck? On Monday morning, Mr. Urban arrived ahead of schedule at the steel factory in Berlin, ready to unload. There was no space. At 8 p.m, just a few miles from the factory, the lorry ploughed into the crowded Christmas market, killing 12 people and injuring 49. The driver fled into the darkness of the Tiergarten Park, pursued by a witness who called the police. A 23-year-old Pakistani man was arrested near the park's Victory Column monument, but there was nothing to link him to the truck. And in those precious few hours, the real suspect, possibly injured, had escaped. Mr. Urban, it seems, was kept alive, perhaps until the very moment of the attack. A GPS tracker is reported to show that around 3:45, the truck was driven erratically, as if someone was learning to drive it. The blood spots found inside the cab could be that of the suspect. Police have since checked all the hospitals in Berlin, where victims of the attack continue to be treated.
8 of them are heavily injured, 2 of them died. And we have now here in this hospital 4 patients with severe trauma of the lower extremities and the pelvis.
One of the 12 victims is said to be Fabrizia Di Lorenzo, a 31-year-old Italian who's not been heard of since the attack. Her phone and metro pass were found at the scene. There's no doubt the early slip-up in this investigation piles more pressure onto the embattled Chancellor Angela Merkel. And it will not help her cause that the Tunisian they are hunting appears to have slipped into the country earlier this year when she opened the doors to thousands of refugees.
In an abstract way, we knew this was going to happen. And this isn't the first, it's just the first big attack. But there's a difference. There's always a disconnect between what you know and in your mind and how you actually react when it happens and how you prepare. Because obviously this place was not protected enough. And the same goes for all the other Christmas markets all over Germany and all sorts of things. And when you go to France nowadays, you see military on the streets. A place like this would have had, armored vehicles protecting it. And the Germans said, oh, we don't want to do this. We don't want our Christmas feeling to be destroyed. And that's an understandable, nice, gentle way of looking things, but it's the wrong way. That's yesterday. Things have got to change. I mean, even today, I think actually there's not enough police on the street.
The anxiety that is felt by people in Berlin will be shared by many others around Europe. We've been here before. The simplicity of this attack, the background of the suspect, the clues that were missed, and of course, the difficulty in trying to stop them. Christian Fraser, BBC News.
Well, let's go to Berlin now. Our correspondent Robert Hall is there. And Robert, widespread reports about the hunt for this Tunisian man, but no confirmation as yet from the authorities.
That's right, Sophie, and I think we need to be very guarded about this. One can say that the press reports are numerous and from different sources. They refer to the man himself, the circumstances which may have led police to follow a trail, and to a police operation which some media sources are saying is underway near a town called Cleve, up in the northwest of Germany, near the Dutch border. A town that, again, it is said, NSA may have connections to. So that is a developing story. Perhaps, maybe we'll get some confirmation from police later on. Here on the scene, all around me here, the hubbub of Berlin at Christmas, but not around the Kaiser Wilhelm Church. Still sealed off, the market stalls shuttered, streets closed, and everywhere shrines springing up. This area at Christmas has become a place of solitude and remembrance.
Robert Hall in Berlin, thank you. Well, here, Scotland Yard is bringing forward extra security measures for the Changing the Guard ceremony at Buckingham Palace in light of the Berlin attack. Roads around the palace were closed this morning. The restrictions are being introduced sooner than planned. Our correspondent Richard Lister is there. Richard.
Sophie, the Changing the Guard ceremony is obviously famous around the world. It's one of the great tourist attractions for London, and today was no exception. There were at least 1,000 tourists here by our reckoning, lining up against the gates of Buckingham Palace and all along the roads either side. Those people we spoke to said they felt safe, they felt reassured by the presence of a number of armed officers. This always has a heavy police presence, of course, but we thought we saw more armed officers than usual. What is new today, and what none of the people that we spoke to seem to have noticed, was the fact that more roads were closed and for longer than usual. Traffic is being kept much further away from the front of Buckingham Palace during the Changing the Guard ceremony. The road closures come into effect now from 10:45 and they're not reopened until 12:30. So that's quite a substantial impact on this part of London, and it's going to happen for the next 3 months, a trial period that was always due to come into force, but the Metropolitan Police say was brought in earlier to start today in reaction to what happened in Berlin. Sophie.
Richard, thank you. A multi-millionaire property developer has been found guilty of murdering his escort girlfriend. Newport Crown Court heard that Peter Morgan, who's married with 2 children, admitted killing Georgina Simmons after she threatened to blackmail him. But he denied murder on the grounds of diminished responsibility. Our Wales correspondent Sian Lloyd reports.
Georgina Simmons, a 25-year-old mother of 1, murdered by the man who called himself her sugar daddy. She'd met Peter Morgan 4 years ago while working as an escort. The court heard that the 54-year-old became infatuated with her. During the trial, the property millionaire admitted strangling Georgina Simmons with baling twine, but denied murder on the grounds of diminished responsibility.
X marks the spot.
This was Peter Morgan before he met Georgina Simmons. The footage of him restoring an old windmill was shown in court. It was one of the places that the pair would later meet. The married father of two paid her £10,000 a month, took her on helicopter flights and bought expensive gifts. She later moved into a bungalow in the grounds of a ruined Tudor mansion that Morgan owned. Police visited the property when Georgina Simmons was reported missing after failing to pick up her daughter from school. This body cam filming records Morgan claiming he didn't know where she'd gone.
Where do we think she was going at 12 o'clock?
Didn't say. She didn't say. She just wanted me gone by 12. I don't know whether she was off out or whether somebody was coming here or what.
But Georgina Simmons was already dead. Peter Morgan had hidden her body in the barn next to his home some 20 miles away. He told the court that he'd heard her threaten to blackmail him and then leave him.
Morgan had been using a bugging device similar to this one. It's disguised as a plug, and he was using it to listen in to Georgina Simmons's conversations. Inside there's a SIM card and a microphone. The property developer could activate it from his own mobile phone. Over a 2-month period, he called it 514 times and spent hours on end listening in.
This is the moment when he told police officers what he'd done.
Yeah. The trouble was, once I sort of attempted to murder her, I've been in a hell of a lot of trouble for that, and she could have still gone on and blackmailed me, couldn't she?
Peter Morgan had told psychiatrists that he was having a midlife crisis. The court was told that he had Asperger's syndrome, but that was not a defence. The murder of Georgina Simmons had been carefully planned. Sian Lloyd, BBC News, Newport Crown Court.
The European Court of Justice has ruled that the government should not be allowed to retain internet data under a new law which critics call the Snoopers Charter. The Home Office said the government was disappointed with the ruling and would seek to overturn it. Well, with me here is our legal correspondent Clive Coleman, and this is the law that forces internet companies to hold data for up to a year so police, security services could look at it. What happens now then?
Well, this is a real headache for the government. We're talking about communications data. We're not talking about the content of that data, but we're talking about the who, the what, the where and the when of phone calls, text messages, emails and internet browsing, and that can give a very personal picture of someone's life. Now, the ruling today says that the blanket, indiscriminate retention of that data is frankly illegal, and the only thing that can be justified is specific targeting of that data in relation to the combating of serious crime. Now, that's a big problem for the government because the Investigatory Powers Act, known by some as the Snoopers Charter, has as an important part of it the power to retain that data generally for up to 12 months on any individual. So what is likely to happen here is that there will be legal challenges to this act, which came into force very recently. So as I say, a really big problem for the government. Now, they've responded by saying that they're disappointed with today's ruling. The case actually comes back to our Court of Appeal, which had referred it to the European Court of Justice. Slightly complicated, but they will be bound by this ruling. The government says it's going to put robust arguments there, but it also says that so important is the collection of this data that it will continue to do it in a way that is compliant.
Clive, thank you. The business organisation, the CBI, has called for UK firms to continue to enjoy tariff-free access to European markets post-Brexit after conducting the largest consultation of its members since the EU referendum. It's published a report urging the government to adopt a so-called whole economy approach to ensure that individual sectors don't lose out. Our business correspondent John Moylan reports.
What parts of the economy should we prioritise as we leave the EU? Do we want finance? Or maybe farming to get the best deal? How about the creative industries? Or even construction? After a wide-ranging consultation with firms, the CBI has concluded Brexit needs to work for everyone. Take farming. On paper, it adds £9 billion in value to the economy. That compares with £120 billion by finance. But farmers say those numbers don't tell the whole story.
agriculture is seen as more important or less important depending on the size of its contribution to the economy. For me, actually, I think we've got to be careful. That misses a trick about all the other things we do, the environment, the landscape, etc. We may well be sacrificed for financial services or for another sector, and this is an industry we can't afford to lose.
The CBI says that businesses want to make a success of Brexit, and it says there are key priorities that they all share.
What we want to see is that every sector is able to do three things: have continued tariff-free and non-tariff-free access to the European market. Secondly, to be able to access the people, talent and skills they need to succeed for the business. And third, to have a set of rules and regulations where there's stability and certainty.
Those rules and regulations really matter. Our aerospace and defence industry is overseen on an EU basis. That helps with safety and exports. Setting up an equivalent regulator in the UK as part of Brexit would come at a cost.
Not being a member of the European Aviation Safety Agency would cost the UK government up to £40 million per annum. It would add unnecessary administrative burden to industry and potentially minimise or make it more difficult for us to export to key markets around the world.
The government says that it will deliver the best possible access for UK businesses trading with Europe, and that it wants a smooth and orderly exit that works for all sectors of the economy. John Moylan, BBC News.
Police say victims in the national football abuse scandal could have been as young as 4 years old, and there are now around 400 possible victims. Officers say the number of potential suspects has nearly doubled to 155. 148 football clubs are said to have been drawn into their inquiries. At least 31 people are now known to have died in a series of explosions at a fireworks market in Mexico. Footage shows a single stall catching fire, triggering a chain reaction of blasts. It's the third major blast at the market since 2005. Our correspondent Will Grant sent this report.
Captured on mobile phone footage, the moment the San Pablito fireworks market was engulfed in flames. Within minutes, the entire site destroyed in a blaze of smoke, noise and deadly explosions. Once the smoke cleared, the scale of the damage became clear. A fire at the main fireworks market outside Mexico City was always likely to have devastating consequences. Most big celebrations in Mexico involve fireworks, so in the run-up to Christmas, it was full of shoppers. The local authorities have already confirmed around 30 deaths and many more injured. Once nearby residents got over the initial shock of the blast, they did what they could to assist the emergency services.
We were in the area when there was an explosion at a shop at the end of the road, and then a series of blasts came one after the other. People started to fall down a lot. They started running and pieces of concrete and bricks started falling all over the street.
It was very loud. There were several explosions and we saw the smoke. We thought it was the gas station, but then we saw it was the fireworks. We heard several very strong explosions and then the smoke came up.
For the time being, the authorities say they're still investigating the cause of the tragedy. But whatever is behind it, this isn't the first explosion at San Pablito. In 2005, just before Mexican Independence Day, the market caught light, injuring more than 120 people. At the time, the Mexican government vowed to impose stricter regulations on the fireworks industry, but many Mexicans are angry that the rules are often never applied or never enforced, and that Mexico State's market traders and shoppers lost their lives through a potentially avoidable accident. Will Grant, BBC News.
The time is coming up to 1:20, our top story this lunchtime. German police are reportedly hunting for a Tunisian asylum seeker who's now believed to have carried out the lorry attack in Berlin. And coming up, the 102-year-old scientist who's won his battle to keep working despite being described as a health and safety risk by his university.
In South today at 1:30, long-distance learning, the army families living apart but reading the same books. And the rugby veterans trying out a new non-contact sport, walking rugby's gaining converts.
President Obama has less than a month left in office, but he has used his last days in the White House to bring in a ban on new drilling for oil and gas in most US-owned waters in the Arctic Ocean, as well as parts of the Atlantic. He's used a 1950s federal law to make the change, meaning that Donald Trump will have to go through the courts if he wants to overturn it. Our environment analyst, Roger Harrabin, reports.
The oil industry has a bad safety record in northern waters. Look back to 1989, the tanker Exxon Valdez aground in Alaska, spilling hundreds of thousands of barrels of crude oil, polluting 1,300 miles of coastline. Some of the oil still endures, and some animal species have yet to recover. Northern waters are so cold, it takes bacteria much longer to break up oil products than it would in warmer waters, and drilling conditions are among the most challenging on Earth. As Shell discovered in 2014, its drilling rig, the Culloch, also aground in the Arctic's tempestuous seas. The firm later halted its Arctic exploration program.
This is a win for common sense. The oil companies wanted to go further north as the ice cap melts to drill for more oil, and this is a serious move against them. It's a win for the communities on those coasts who would have been devastated if there'd been an oil spill, and it's a win for the climate because we cannot afford to burn that oil.
Oil keeps the world moving, and the industry says we need more of it, but its CO2 emissions heat the climate, and scientists say we've already found 3 times more fossil fuels than we can burn without risking the planet. The Arctic is already warming fast. Scientists are very alarmed. President Obama's drilling ban is good news for environmental protection there, if it lasts.
President-elect Trump says he's not worried about climate change. He wants to protect jobs in the coal industry. He wants to build new oil pipelines, and he wants to pull the United States out of the world deal on global warming. The decision by President Obama to attempt to lock up the Arctic is part of his attempt to ensure his legacy on climate change. Roger Harrabin, BBC News.
Official figures show the government borrowed more money than expected last month. The Office for National Statistics says public sector borrowing reached £12.6 billion in November, around £500 million more than most economists predicted. Our economics correspondent Andy Verity is here. So how worrying is that?
Sophie, I guess it depends on whether your glass at Christmas time is half full or half empty. If it's half full, you'll look at these numbers and you'll say, well, at least they're coming down. This is a lower number than was being borrowed last year. £12.6 billion was the amount that had to be borrowed because the government is overspending its income. But it is coming down. And you could look at the year to date, it's £59 billion compared to a larger sum than that last year. But if your glass at Christmas is half empty, you might say, well, even the softer target that was set in the autumn statement to borrow no more than £68 billion for the whole financial year, we're nearly there already. We only have £10 billion left to borrow for the next 4 months. The Chancellor could well bust through even that looser overdraft limit if something goes wrong with tax receipts. Again, if your glass is half full, spending is rising, but the tax money is rolling in faster than that. So there is some good news. Glass half empty. Well, the deficit was supposed to be eliminated last year. It's still there.
Andy Verity, thank you. The government's proposing tougher controls on people using drones after dozens of near misses involving drones and aircraft in the UK over the past year. Ministers are beginning a consultation on plans that include no-fly zones around airports and exams to ensure that owners know just how to use drones safely. Our technology correspondent Rory Kethlen-Jones has this report.
Moments after receiving the order,
earlier this month, Amazon made its first delivery by drone to a customer in Cambridgeshire. Just one potential use of an exciting new technology, which the government says could soon be a big contributor to the economy. But things can go wrong. This drone careered across an estuary in Cumbria and almost clipped a road bridge, landing its owner with an £800 fine. And reports from pilots of near misses with drones have led to mounting concerns about safety.
If people don't use drones responsibly and follow the rules and regulations which are in place, obviously that's a safety issue, first of all, but it could also affect the long-term future of drones as well.
There are already plenty of regulations. I couldn't, for instance, fly this here because we're too close to buildings and people. But while professional users of drones have to register with the Civil Aviation Authority, anyone else can just buy one and start flying. The government is consulting on regulations which would mean new drones would have to be registered, users would have to pass a theory test, much like that for drivers, and there'd be tougher penalties for using drones in no-fly zones. These pictures were captured by an amateur drone user, Peter Galbavi, on holiday in Australia. He says the rules there are far simpler than in the UK and warns that there's a risk in imposing a clampdown.
Leisure users are the future employees and users of drones and other unmanned aircraft for more commercial reasons. If you put regulations in place that are too complicated and they scare people off, then you're going to deny that future industry this pool of talent that we need.
There'll be thousands of new drone owners this Christmas. Even before new rules come in, they're being told they'll be safer if they follow the existing drone code. Rory Catherine-Jones, BBC News.
Some news now just coming into us, and we've been told that the Queen has cancelled plans to travel by train today to her private Sandringham estate in Norfolk. She's understood to be feeling unwell. Our royal correspondent Nicholas Witchell is with me now. What more do we know?
Not a lot, actually, Sophie. I think the first thing, though, to say is there is no cause for alarm, or there appears to be no alarm at Buckingham Palace. They're being very matter-of-fact about it. But it is the case that she had been due to travel to Sandringham today to begin the Christmas break there. Now, she normally travels up by train. That's a train journey over a couple of hours. It was noticed this morning that she had not caught the train that she normally catches to King's Lynn, and questions were then, of course, asked. It now transpires that officials at Buckingham Palace are saying that she is feeling unwell. We don't know in what way, but as I say, there is no suggestion of panic or of alarm there. She's at Buckingham Palace. Whether it's a heavy cold, whether it's something else, I don't know. She was last seen in public a couple of weeks ago at Westminster Abbey. She was attending a service then marking the 60th anniversary of the Duke of Edinburgh's award. She's had a number of audiences, private audiences, since then. It was 3 years ago, in early 2013, that she was last unwell. That was some sort of stomach disorder. She joked at one stage that the doctors didn't actually know what was wrong with her, but it barely interrupted her programme. So I'm sure that at some point this afternoon, the Palace will tell us what the problem is.
Nick Witchell, thank you. A 102-year-old scientist has won his battle to carry on working at an Australian university, despite being described as a health and safety risk. Dr. David Goodall was told he would have to work from home from the new year, but the university in Perth has now reversed its decision. Our correspondent Hal Griffith sent this report.
After 7 decades as an ecologist, David Goodall says his natural environment is here, on campus, surrounded by academic life. In August, the centenarian was told it was no longer safe for him to come into work at the Edith Cowan University, and he was asked to stay at home. But after his case won international support, the management has now relented and found him this new office.
I have only been here 1 day, so it's a bit difficult for me to express any particular concerns. But I think that they will try to make me at home.
The journey from home will be much quicker. Reaching his old office involved a 90-minute commute on a train and 2 buses. The university says they've always had his interests at heart.
First of all, it's closer to his residence, so it's easier for him to commute. Secondly, there's an office very close to it, manned most of the time, so we'll be able to keep an eye on him, that he's okay.
Having been forced to give up his other love of acting, Dr. Goodall is determined to keep his mind active. At 102, he's not out yet. Howell Griffith, BBC News.
And finally, a baby gorilla who had to be delivered by a gynecologist in a rare caesarean operation at Bristol Zoo has been reunited with her family in time for Christmas. Afia was born by emergency C-section 10 months ago, and after her mother became too ill to care for her, she was hand-reared by keepers at the zoo. With the help of a surrogate gorilla mother, she has now become fully integrated with the rest of the troop and is able to spend 24 hours a day with them. Lovely. Time for a look at the weather now with Louise Lear. Some stormy weather heading our way.
Yes, it's arrived. Everything bar the kitchen sink across the far northwest of Scotland. And in actual fact, today we've got a little bit of white stuff across the Highlands, as you can see, sent in by this Weather Watchers picture. It's the winds, though, that's the real issue through today across the northwest. We're seeing gusts of winds in excess of 40, 50 miles an hour developing at the moment. So gales or severe gales likely driving in some pretty squally showers with it. At the same time, we have got a band of rain moving through Lincolnshire down into the Midlands and gradually pushing into the southwest. But it's the showers across the northwest that's the real issue through this afternoon. Really merging together for longer spells of rain at times, some hail, some sleet and snow, chiefly to the hills, but maybe even at lower levels. And it's going to feel quite cool out there as well when you factor in the wind. The cloud and rain will sit across the Midlands and down into the southwest, where it's likely to pep up a little as we move towards the afternoon. But across southeast England, yes, it's a little bit drizzly, but not a bad afternoon. Most of the rain not arriving until after dark. That then drifts its way further south and east, and with clearer skies behind, in more rural spots we could see a touch of frost. The showers keep on going into the far northwest. Ice could be an issue as well, as temperatures in rural parts fall close to freezing. So it's a pretty miserable start to Thursday in Scotland and maybe Northern Ireland. Windy with frequent showers continuing. Elsewhere, though, not a bad day, and prospects some decent sunny spells coming through. A little bit fresher, but highs of around 4 to 10 degrees. Now, as we move out of Thursday into Friday, we need to talk about Barbara. We can't ignore her. Here she is, this deep area of low pressure moving in. And it's the strength of the winds that's the real issue with this significant area of low. In fact, so much so we've got an amber weather warning. Be prepared for some disruption across the far northwest of the UK. The strongest of the winds to the southern flank of the low as it shifts away. 90 mile an hour gusts plus across the extreme northwest. But widely, we're going to see gusts of winds across Scotland, Northern Ireland, Northern England for a time of 70 miles an hour. Accompanied by some rain, yes, but it should rattle through at quite a pace. We're not too concerned at this point with the volume of rain that we're going to see, but there's certainly going to be some disruptions across travel and transport. Certainly keep watching the weather forecast. If you're travelling on Christmas Eve, a brief lull in proceedings. I suspect breezy and showery, but if I just move out of the way, this storm is likely to arrive, unfortunately, for Christmas Day. Yet more wet and windy weather. At the moment, it looks likely to be across the northern half of the country. So plenty going off with the weather. Doesn't look too bad towards the south. Certainly keep tuned to the forecast. We will, of course, update you. Back to you, Sophie.
Louise, thank you. A reminder now of our main story this lunchtime. German police are reportedly hunting for a Tunisian asylum seeker who may have carried out the lorry attack in Berlin. It's thought documents belonging to him were found hidden in the truck. That's all from the BBC News at 1, so it's goodbye from me on BBC One. We now join the BBC's news teams where you are. Bye-bye.